What was the very first psychological trick you learned that blew your mind? I am a meat popsicle said. Stop talking. If you want to get more information out of someone, just let them speak. There are times in a conversation that things stop. Most people want to fill this themselves, but don't. Let the other person do it. This is especially useful if you think the person in their story is full of shit. Charisma with Axe said. I've used this trick during a dispute with someone I did business with who didn't want to pay the full amount. They tried to justify their reasoning and I just sat there staring at them, not saying a word. This made them very uncomfortable and they started babbling and well, they lost that argument and I walked out of there with a check for what they owed me. They later told my business partner that I made them nervous, which made me laugh because I am not an intimidating person. I just know when to let other people dig their own holes. Watching things said. This was something I learned to do early on because I wanted to learn from everyone whether it's facts or their perspective. This was easy with a group as everyone's just ready to jump in with something, but had to learn that just listening doesn't fly so well with one-on-one conversations. I started sharing a short personal opinions or anecdote and or ask questions to keep the discussion going and so the other person doesn't feel like they're the only one talking. But major content of the discussion is usually made up of the other person's dialogue and I try to pick up as much knowledge, wisdom, or information from it so that I can become a better person from it. Much difference said. My first workplace trick that I still use regularly, people will procrastinate with their own work, but drop everything to quickly correct someone else's work. Example, Bill needs to provide a paragraph of text to go in your company's brochure. He's been dragging his feet forever and it's the last thing you're waiting on but he keeps putting it off. Go to where his paragraph should be and write a shitty version of what he's supposed to do. Don't invest more than 10 seconds. We do widget services. We are good at it. Our services are good for your widget needs. Send it to Bill saying, hey, I filled in the last paragraph about widget services. Can you check and make sure it meets your criteria? And I'll send it along to the boss for approval. You'll have Bill's polished, fully composed text in about 10 minutes. Needs more tuba said. I tell mine that I'm giving her a choice between two things. The catch is that both of the choices are things that I want to have happen. Example, toddler won't nap. I say, would you like to have some juice and then take your nap, or would you like to take a nap without any juice? Those are obviously the same two things, but one is juice, and suddenly the nap becomes more appealing. Hidden Markin said. Another helpful one is to move the goalposts. Instead of, it's time for a nap, you can try I'll only read 3 Little Pigs for nap time today and let them argue about wanting Red Riding Hood while nap time then becomes a given. It's a lifesaver getting out the door in the morning. Kid is throwing a tantrum about not wanting to wear the outfit you chose, so instead of discussing the outfit, you talk about what cereal you have for breakfast and their little contrary brain shifts the tantrum to breakfast choices and forgets they were meant to be arguing about their outfit. It's time for breakfast and you can start talking about which jacket to wear and direct the toddler tantrum onto that. Eventually their little brain gets distracted and forgets they are meant to be disagreeing with everything you suggest. Kids demanding something at the store? Ask who will be the one to select pasta off the shelf, who will unload the cart on the conveyor belt, who will unlock the cart and so forth, just shifting everything up a step. Don't judge, but this technique seriously saved my sanity. Symphony for the Devil said. Oh yeah, little kids are so easy to manipulate. Reverse psychology, making things a game or a challenge. Clean up your toys, no. Clean up your toys, no. Fine, don't clean up your toys, I don't want you to. I'm going to clean them up. No, please don't. I used it so much on my combative child that I was a little worried it'd mess him up tbh. Clean up your toys, no. Clean up your toys, no. I bet you can't clean up your toys before the timer goes off. Yes, I can. I bet you can't. I'm gonna clean up more than you. Symphony for the Devil said. Oh yeah, little kids are so easy to manipulate. Reverse psychology, making things a game or a challenge. Clean up your toys, no. Clean up your toys, no. Fine, don't clean up your toys, I don't want you to. I'm going to clean them up. No, please don't. I used it so much on my combative child that I was a little worried it'd mess him up tbh. Clean up your toys, no. Clean up your toys, no. I bet you can't clean up your toys before the timer goes off. Yes, I can. I bet you can't. I'm gonna clean up more than you. This itches said. This reminds me, at my customer service job, if a caller starts bitching incessantly, I feign outrage with them as though we're two buddies pissed off about the same thing. Often I remove my headset so I don't have to hear a grown man behaving like a toddler, and I interject with acknowledgement noises, and then when they shut up I just proceed with resolving the issue. They realize it would waste more time to explain to me that they're mad at me and not with me, and they piss themselves off for not being enough of a nuisance and just drop the whole act. Or sometimes I respond back with twice the outrage on their behalf and they're embarrassed like okay, it's not quite that big of a deal. Sarah G01 said. Absolutely this. I used to work at a call center, and we'd often have 1+ hour hold times before they got a representative. I would always say thank you for calling, shitty company, and thank you so much for your patience and understanding as part of my greeting. This alone used to quell most conflict. Coworkers who didn't do this reported way more upset people. When they would bitch, I'd always paint them as a good guy and feign empathy. Oh wow, I'm sorry you waited an hour. I know I'd be in a bad mood, so I appreciate you being so pleasant and not taking it out on me. Work 99% of the time. Finger Blast said. I'm so sorry, your wife has been in a serious car accident and taken to hospital. The police said it doesn't look good and she might not make it. Your son was in the back seat and his baby capsule saved him from most of the impact, but he's still got severe whiplash and a concussion, and they're concerned that he might have suffered a spinal cord injury. Your daughter must not have had her seatbelt on, because she was ejected from the car. They found her on the road 50 meters away, bleeding from her ears. They're concerned that she has a skull fracture. Sorry, there was a miscommunication. The issue is I accidentally forgot to email my expense claim through for approval on time. Can I send it through now? 1234 Tempcore said. Kill him with kindness. Wulad, nothing eats away at your enemies like that. Short, sweet, simple, and confident is the trick. You could get into a massive argument for hours, fight, cuss, spit, punch, kick. Nothing will really burn them at the core quite as much as being nice to them. I believe it is a psychological trick because they usually don't expect it. They know your enemies, and it throws them into a loop and off guard. I bumped into my old boss recently. He had absolutely royally screwed me over before I quit, stabbed me square in the back to protect his own hide. I gave him this huge smile, said hey, name, good to see you. He gave a weird frown and returned hi. How have you been? Better than ever. How about you? Fine. He made an obvious effort to keep walking and avoid a conversation. I bumped into him again before I left the place we were at and gave him a nod, nice smile, and the 3-finger wave sort of like a salute. His face said it all. I hate that guy. Why is he happy? 1234 Tempcore said. The Wally Reflector. Thanks to Dilbert Man Scott Adams, I learned the Wally Reflector at a young age. It's very simple. If someone tries to pawn their work off on you, ask them to do something for you first related to said task. 9 times out of 10 they'll leave and try to find someone else. Hey, can you finish this report for me? I'm going on vacation and want to leave a little early to beat traffic to the airport. Sure, I'd love to help. But, could you possibly send me a quick email with a bullet point list of what needs to be in the report, just so I don't miss anything? On second thought. Thikasharub said. The Ben Franklin Effect. Edit. Here's more details about it. Ask for a small favor that you can easily return later on. For example, ask to borrow $5. Return the $5 as soon as possible. Or ask to borrow a book, and return the book in good condition with a thank you note. The person will feel good knowing they've done you a favor, and that will produce favorable feelings towards you. Also, if you return the favor well, they will see that you are responsible and that you acknowledge the niceties others do for you. Note, this effect will backfire if you fail to return the favor well, for example returning a borrowed item in horrible condition. It will also backfire if you ask for too many favors from the same person. For example, a classmate borrowed a mechanical pencil from me. At the end of the period, instead of returning it with a thank you, he left it on the desk having snapped off the plastic clip part and taken the eraser down to a nub. It's a small thing, but it showed that he's disrespectful of others' properties. Bones of an Angel said, a therapist told me that anger is a secondary emotion and should be treated like a traffic light. You should stop at yellow before jumping to red. Ask yourself, what was the first thing come to your mind triggered you? Is it being ignored, feeling trapped, unheard, insecure, etc.? Because your first thought is what you actually feel. Your anger comes last. I'm a calm-natured person, rarely get angry. This advice helped me to identify my weaknesses and anxiety. You can apply this to any emotion, not just anger. Oxalus Rex 1 said, so I used to write standard operating procedures for other departments. I laid the framework and then submitted them to an appropriate department manager for the details. One particular manager was always too busy, and I needed their input in a timely manner because then it was my job to clean up the document formatting and submit it for higher approval. If the manager didn't do his part, the whole chain was bottlenecked and it would be me scrambling at the deadline date. So I started making intentional mistakes in the written procedure. Turns out he was reading them but not making the edits. As soon as I was wrong, he suddenly had time to edit them. 1234 Tempcore said, early in my career I did the exact same thing. When we worked on a new product in engineering, we had to go through sets of approvals and validations. The approval and acknowledgement forms were usually only a few pages and would quickly get lost on certain directors' desks. I came up with a method that worked 100% of the time. Got a 5 inches 3-ring binder. Filled 4.99 inches of it with blank paper. Put the documents to be signed right on top of the stack in a plastic sheet. Walked into a director's office, asked them to sign something. Yeah, sure, just leave it here. Whomp, there goes that binder, shaking their entire desk. I always got my signatures either immediately or within an hour after that. Catman 873 said, I find that when I ask someone if they'd like to be a rewards member, they're more civil with me if I say, would you like to be a rewards member or no? I figure that by saying no at the end I'm insinuating that it is completely fine to say no, I don't want to be. I use this on everyone. Even customers that I see get short with other cashiers when they ask them this, I then ask them my way whenever I'm cashiering and they're completely civil about it. I almost always get from these same people, no thanks, not today. I guess some people view these questions as nuisance because in their mind they feel like they're asked this every time at a lot of stores. Andra Official said, if you want to be involved in any work environment, or feel like an insider during work, you gotta greet everyone you meet right away. If you miss them, turn around, go back, and say something like, sorry, I didn't catch your name. If you don't have time, then take the next chance, even if it's just a hi or a wave. People will see you as assertive and approachable. It doesn't really matter if you're introverted and don't speak to them for the rest of the day or whatever. It kills most of the awkwardness associated with being social with people you may or may not know. Plus, it sets you up for healthy teamwork. Jack of Scarlet said, people who feel guilty will over-explain to justify their actions. I do insurance claims. I don't need to know why you backed into a pole. I don't care. It's covered. All I need is the incident and damage description. But man, some people feel so bad about it, they won't stop going on about how the sun was in their eyes but they should have looked better and they can't believe it happened. And they have a reversing camera and sensors which were supposed to help but they didn't and they're so angry with themselves and it's a new car and they can't believe they've done this. Thep0 at 2652 said, paying someone a compliment before a difficult conversation or fight. Specifically, one tied to the value in your opinion of them. For example, I really appreciate the mature, level-headed way you handled yourself in our last discussion, or your patience and understanding in situations like this is something I really admire about you. It's the upgraded, more subtle version of the thank you for your understanding line you see in customer service a lot. The I and me pronouns are important, as it changes a generic compliment into an opinion or feeling you have about them. It sets a subconscious goal for the person that they will often try to live up to. It's like the subconscious goes, why yes, I am those things, let me prove that you're right. But also adds a little weight that your opinion of them will decrease if they don't. Sometimes I feel bad for using it, because it's almost too manipulative. Especially if I'm lying about that opinion. Sydney Fig Tree said, You know how small yappy dogs and tiny mice running around are terrifying despite us logically being much larger? Well, in kendo there is the disarming scream where you run at your opponent with a loud scream. When I've attempted doing my kendo practice, despite warning the person of what I'm about to do, they inevitably drop the sword and can't take it. I've used this trick even without my old bamboo practice sword. I ran at a violent mugger who was beating a young student. I'm a small woman but the guy still ran off. I've also used this trick to literally throw a guy more than twice my size. Don't recommend unless you know how to do a judo throw. So basically, if you don't have an alternative, loud scream coinciding with running at your opponent works very well at disarming someone. Dumpster Fire said, I told my friend that I was doing this and he got mad. About 5 years ago I had a house that I would host parties at. As dumb young 20s aged people, we would smoke cigarettes. If I didn't have a lighter I would ask for one. Eventually, I decided to try something. I had a joke where I would snap my fingers and say I wish I was the Human Torch or some shit. After the small giggle someone would offer a lighter. As I did it more often, I noticed that I wouldn't have to make the joke and someone would hand me a lighter. It got to a point where if I snapped my fingers my roommate would grab his pocket out of instinct. That's the story about how I Pavloved a few of my friends. Lemonfinch Tea said, keeping things about yourself private until the perfect moment. I don't tell people much about myself from the get-go. I purposely never mention my profession, my family life, religion, where I'm from, etc. in conversations with people I just met. I keep the topics more general and friendly. Those seeking approval or like-mindedness for their opinions, prejudices, beliefs will blurt out exactly what they think when they begin to trust you. That's the perfect time to say, well, actually, I'm blank. It's fun to see their facial expression and try to backtrack on all the terrible things they just said about people like you. But there's no justifying it. It's a good way to test whether or not you'd want someone like this in your life before you cultivate a friendship. On the flip side, you'll find that most people are cool with your individuality and support it. Those people are keepers. Professional Chump said, I won't define it here and maybe it's not super relevant to the question at hand, but after I learned about this concept I started noticing how much blame was being cast on me, mainly by my mother, not because I deserved it but because she couldn't see some negative aspects within herself and so her brain had to slap the labels onto something external, that is me. I was always defending myself and just so many stupid arguments it's hard to describe without a solid understanding of projecting. If you find yourself constantly battling someone else and frustratingly nothing's getting solved, it could be because the wrong person is under blame. Sometimes it's subtle, but I've had times where my mom would do some manipulative shit and pause, and then turn to me and say why do you keep so and so manipulating shit? Burn After Greeting said, when you ask for something, give a reason. Any reason at all. In the study that popularized this idea, it was people asking to cut in line for a Xerox machine, copier. They would literally say, can I cut you in line? But sometimes they would also say I'm in a rush, a valid reason to cut in line, and sometimes they would instead say I need to make copies. Except, it's a copy machine. Everyone is there to make copies. What they found is that, when the request isn't high effort, a terrible reason, Langer called it placebo information, is just as effective as a good reason. Worst case is just that it's a high effort task, and in those situations it makes no difference so might as well ask. Link to the scholarly article, which I'd never honestly read until now but found just for you special people. Dumpsterfire 1998 said, not really a psychology trick but I thought I'd share. Every time me and my partner can't figure out where we want to go out on a date we do 5, 2, 1. My partner will list off 5 places they would like. I narrow it down to 2 I would like to eat it from what they have given me. Then we agree on a final decision from the last 2. It really helps in ensuring both of us feel heard and get what we want. It helps us avoid petty arguments that aren't a big deal and takes a lot of stress off of us. An alternative to the agreeing on the final answer is taking turns and switching who is the final say. Last time I picked the final place so this time you pick. I noticed that many times we get into big fights it's because a bunch of little things that angered us just kept piling up and we kept them to ourselves because it wasn't a big deal. Now we have the 24-hour rule. If something bothers you for more than a couple of hours, you have to tell the other person within the next 24. You feel heard, it gets it out of the way, and these petty little things don't add up because you have been consistently clearing the air and talking about things. Laughing Beer said, I don't know if this qualifies, but I found a weird defensive trick in basketball. Assuming you're in a defensive stance, knees bent, legs spread further than width of shoulders, ready to shuffle quickly to one side or another, and the person with the ball tries to drive by you towards the basket, if you stop and hold your ground, most of the time they will run into you. This is a charge. So your ball. As an added bonus, when they run into you, they usually hit their inner thigh on your knee, giving themselves a Charlie horse. So sometimes they writhe on the ground in pain for a few minutes too. Non-believer Jen said, when my 3 sons were pretty young, think Irish twins but more like triplets, when they would tell a fib their faces would give it away. Besides the eyes and the expression on their little faces, their little foreheads would wrinkle up from their eyes getting so big when they'd fib. Their eyebrows would go up really high on their foreheads and then wrinkles would show. They were all really cute with their tells. So, one day I told my sons, I know you're lying because your forehead lights up, literally, their wrinkled little foreheads is what I meant. But they were 3, 2, and 1. In an attempt to conceal their little white lies as an attempt to outsmart their mama, they began to cover their foreheads. If I couldn't see their foreheads, I wouldn't see the lit up forehead after all. Then after a few times of this happening, the 3 boys got so confused about my magic abilities to see what they were so cleverly hiding. What's funny, now that they're grown men, they still have the same tells when they try to keep the whole truth to me, and still they don't get why I always know when one isn't being honest. Marsad said, believing I can do what I set my mind to. Turns out I've always been able to turn the head on my diagnosis ADHD by going through the uncomfortable process of forcing myself to concentrate on something. I've gotten good grades in my degree, focused and fully involved myself in conversations and narratives and stories, as well as immersing myself in moments that matter to me instead of getting distracted. Works wonders. Just have to try hard. Kaya's son said, there's one that's not seen much anymore. You make a pyramid of 7s, ending with a row of 7 sevens, and ask someone to say them as if they are actual numbers, 7, 77, 777, etc. Before they begin, tell them that you're going to ask them a question when they finish, which they must answer immediately. If done correctly, they almost always say carrots. This only works if they immediately answer. If they hesitate or repeat the question, it won't work. I have no idea why this works. Light TLRU said, I'm a cook apprentice RN, and I once had to serve burgers with the person that is in charge of my apprenticeship, and due to corona we had to give them the sauces so they don't touch them. Anyway, I always asked which sauce they wanted, and then they always thouged for a bit, and it slowed me down south, and the cook that was with me said, just say you and ketchup, nothing more. I did that and they always just said yes, and so I found out if you offer your customer what you want to sell and take their choice, you can actually speed things up and sell that what you want to sell. That was pretty interesting.